Hi, my name's Mary Jane, and I'm one of the clinic nurses for the HEROES program here at Children's, and we're the weight management program. So we're going to talk tonight about prevention, and we're going to talk about definitions of what obesity is in pediatrics and what definitions of overweight children are. We're going to also give you some tips on nutrition. We're going to talk to you about fitness tonight, and just kind of cover a general overview of what we see in our pediatric clinic. We're going to talk a little bit about the HEROES program after we get going here. These are the objectives we're going to cover tonight, so I kind of talked about those just a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and go on to definitions. We do have two different definitions, where there's the overweight person and there's the obese person. And the way we define it in children is different than what we do with adults, so I'm going to define it specifically for pediatric patients. We'll also talk about healthy weights for your child. So we want to know what kind of ranges to keep your kids in. This is the growth chart. You have probably seen one in your doctor's office, and here at Children's, in our children's physician's offices, we do heights and weights and BMIs, which is the body mass index calculation with every clinic visit. And these are charted on these standardized charts, and these are standardized charts from the CDC, so it doesn't matter where you're at in the country. These are the same charts that everybody uses, every pediatrician and family practice uses. This is kind of the definition of BMI in pediatrics in that purple circle there. I'm going to kind of differentiate here and talk with you about the differences between how we calculate BMI for adults and how we do it for children. You and I as adults, when we go to our doctor and they do a height and weight on us, they will make calculations that determine our body mass index, and we will be given a specific number. Obviously, if your number is anywhere between about 20 and 24, that's in the normal weight category. If you're 25 to about 29, that's considered overweight, and if you're above 30, that's getting into the obese category. We can't give specific numbers to children because we have to factor in their growth. So a child's BMI is, we still use the height and weight to calculate their BMI, but we do it on a percentile. So that's why all of this is percentile as far as the definitions. And these definitions are from the American Academy of Pediatrics, so they're standardized. They're not something that we made up here at Children's. These are nationwide standards. An underweight child is anybody that's less than the 5th percentile, and that would be probably considered a failure to thrive child. If you're normal weight, you're anywhere from the 5th percentile to the 84th percentile. So you see there's a big range of what is considered normal weight in children. If you're overweight, you're in the 85th to 94th percentile. And if you're above the 95th percentile, that is considered obese in pediatrics. The kids that we see in the HEROES program are in the 85th percentile and above. There is a term called morbidly obese. I forgot to talk about that. That is basically kids that are super heavy. A lot of these kids, their BMI percentile is greater than 100%. And part of the growth chart, this is how you see it on the growth chart. You've got the 5, 10, 25. Those are the standard percentiles, and those are plotted out in there. So how come we care about excessive weight? There's a study that was done a few years ago, and it talks about kids in the age 2 to 19-year-old range. A third of them are either overweight or obese, and 17% of those kids are in the obese category. That's a lot of kids. Now, we have found over the last few years that at least the trend is starting to level off. It used to be it just kept climbing. But nowadays it's starting to level off a little bit, and I think a lot of that is due to more education, and parents are getting much more aware of how to manage their kids' diet and nutrition and fitness activities. You can see there were big jumps from 1980 to 2008, and this is broken down by different age ranges. So we did a lot of changing in a relatively short time. You know, that's about that range for years is about a generation. So in a generation, we made some big jumps in weight gain in this country. There are a lot of different theories as to why we made those jumps. Part of it is we all have extremely busy lifestyles, and a lot of our families are two working parents, so the kids spend a lot of time in after-school activities or at the babysitters. There's been an increase in video game playing and TV time. Some of our kids, especially from lower socioeconomic neighborhoods, don't live in the safest areas, so they're not allowed to go outside and play because it's just not safe for them. They don't have the financial resources to go buy gym memberships either. So, you know, they learn to basically just sit in front of the couch or sit on the couch in front of the TV and watch TV to entertain themselves or read books or play games or something like that. The one thing that we do know is that if you're an obese child, you have a better than even chance of becoming an obese adult. We also have seen studies where if you have one parent that is obese and one parent that's normal weight, you have a greater than even chance of becoming obese yourself. And if you have two obese parents, your chances increase. Childhood obesity equals multiple diseases. It leads to a lot of different diseases with these kids. These are called comorbidities. What we see in our clinic, in the Heroes Clinic, is a lot of kids who have developed adult diseases at a very young age. It is not unusual for our kids to come in with high blood pressure. We have several kids on blood pressure medications already, and they're not even, some of them aren't even teenagers yet. We have kids with extremely high cholesterols. We don't do a lot of medication management for like Lipitor and those kinds of drugs. We don't do a lot of that with our kids unless they have been compliant with the program and they're still not, their cholesterols and triglycerides are still not coming down. But a lot of that is genetics also. This little slide here, this kind of gives you an idea of all the different types of disease processes that can go on and due to excess weight. And they can be either diminished, the symptoms can be diminished or improved just by diet and exercise changes alone. So that is a whole lot of stress we're putting on our kids' bodies. And to give you an idea of some of the kids that we see in our clinic, we have 5-year-olds that are weighing 80 and 90 and 100 pounds. We have teenagers that are weighing well over 300 pounds. So you can imagine the kind of stress that's put on skeletal frames that have not hit their adult height yet. They're not strong enough, their bones are not strong enough to handle this weight. We have a lot of kids with orthopedic problems. We have a lot of kids that are pre-diabetic. We have kids that are already diabetic. We have kids that have asthma issues, sleep apnea problems, a lot of gastroesophageal reflux, chronic heartburn and everything. So you can see that this is a problem that if we don't get it under control now, this is where all of our healthcare dollars are going to go in the future. It's much cheaper to be preventative and stop these disease processes before they get really started, so that 20 years down the road you're not telling some kid that he may not live to see his next birthday if he doesn't make some changes. And I can tell you right now, we've told some teenage boys that they probably won't live to see 30 unless they make these changes. So it's huge. The most common cardiovascular problems that we see obviously are high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and also abnormal blood sugars. These kids, when they overeat, you put a lot of strain on your pancreas, and that's where your insulin is produced. So a lot of times we have kids that are called insulin resistant. That means that their pancreas is working overtime to produce enough insulin to take care of all the sugar they're dumping into their body. And eventually, it's like any kind of medication, your body just builds up a tolerance to it, so it makes your pancreas work harder and harder until your pancreas finally says, you know what, I quit, I'm done working, you're going to have to go find your insulin somewhere else. And at that point, that's when you become an insulin-dependent diabetic. Like I said, a lot of our kids have one risk factor already developed, and many of them have two factors already going on. And I'm going to turn part of this over to Peg now. Peg is our psychologist. She's also my manager, so I have to pretend, be a good girl today. But she has a PhD in psychology, so she's going to talk about a lot of the prevention and the behavioral modification part of it.
Y'all with us? Anybody gone to sleep yet? Good, you're here. So when we talk about prevention, we're talking about making those interventions that are going to save you work on down the road, right? And the earlier you intervene, the better off you're going to be. And this is all about, for you as parents, being in charge, which is easier said than done a lot of the time. So first of all, let's talk about behaviors. The difference between those behaviors that you can change, or those factors that you can change, and those that you cannot. The good news is that the list of things that cannot be changed is shorter than those that can. There are just some things, if you're born female or if you're born male, chances are good that that's going to stay that way. Other things go along that type of path. But as you can see, there's lots of other behaviors that contribute to poor nutrition, excessive weight that can be controlled, like sleep. We're learning a lot more, for example, about how important it is to get a good night's sleep. And what is the first thing that goes, especially in the adult world, when you're a little stressed or you just need to manufacture more time in your schedule? Sleep. Right? Oh, I'll go to bed a little bit later, I'll get up a little bit earlier. And what I would like to plant the seed of right now is modeling. What are you modeling for your children when you do things like that? Especially when you're turning around and saying to them, you need to get a good night's sleep. So again, thinking in terms of behaviors, that one of the ways we make changes, especially if we're requiring these changes in our children, is also by modeling healthy, appropriate, effective behavior. So this is talking about what healthy eating looks like. You would think that it would be pretty intuitive, right? But we're in a day and age, like Mary Jane was talking about, where we're very busy, and it doesn't look like it did back when. For example, the family meal. We know that that's important, but it's really hard to get everybody around a table on a consistent basis. It takes work. And that, if there is one thing you could do for your kids, I would encourage family meal time. And making that happen at least 3-4 nights a week. And as your children get older, I'm thinking when they're that size, that's nice because they're hostage, right? You can put them there, and they may not be happy about it, but they're there, right? And I have a teenager living at my house, and she has other things that she thinks she needs to do with her schedule. So again, you're the parents, you're in charge, and what you require is up to you. But you also have to pick your battles. So it's being wise about it. When you do feeding, you're responsible for putting the food in front of the child and saying when this is going to happen, and you also control the menu, if you will, to some degree. The child is responsible for how much of that food they're going to eat and whether they're going to eat it or not. So this is when we talk about the no thank you bites, right? Especially with younger children. But again, I have a teenager and we're still doing no thank you bites on some things at my house. So this is when you offer those foods because you're trying to get a lot of variety into the diet, and plan on offering foods at least 5 times and sometimes in excess of 20 times to get that child to take a bite and really get their head wrapped around whether they're going to like that food or not. When you're feeding your family, make sure that there's an item or two that's familiar, comfortable, that they really like, but then you're also introducing other things that are healthy foods, good tasting foods, but you're trying to create variety in that diet for your child. Again, as they get older, what you expect of them, it's not a battleground and you're not going to make them eat, but you also can expect them to be a little more tolerant because they're older and they have a better coping strategy menu available to them. When they're little, you expect them to wing their spoon across the floor, right? When they're a teenager, maybe not. Maybe that's inappropriate. Maybe they can use their words then, and talk about the food. So here's some different case studies, and I know we're going to do questions at the end, so I'm sure you'll have questions or kind of this is how it plays out at my house, and we can talk about that then. So the only way I can get my kids to eat is if I have them in front of a TV, right? And they're watching their cartoons or watching their movies or whatever. So what do I do about that? Well, turn off the TV. That is a behavior that needs to be extinguished because I'm a psychologist, remember? What you're doing is pairing two things you don't want to go together, eating and the TV, because what you're encouraging is mindless eating. They aren't cued into, am I getting full? Am I enjoying what I'm tasting? The other thing is what the research is telling us now is that for those people who are multitasking while they're eating, they actually get less benefit from the food. They are actually ingesting fewer of the nutrients. And it's sort of like they're numbing themselves to the food. So typically they need to eat more to get the same benefit as far as feeling full or being mindful of what's going on. And so here as adults, again, right, how many of you had lunch in front of a computer today? So right there, you have to pay attention to what kind of behavior are you modeling. And taking that 20, 30 minutes a day, even though it's painful, and figuring out how to get a meal for yourself and really starting to understand what healthy eating is like. So turn off the TV at mealtime. My child will only eat if I sit there and watch him, and he's not allowed to leave the table until he cleans his plate. If you are in a situation where you truly don't know where your next meal is coming from or when it's going to happen, it makes sense to clean your plate because you don't know when you're going to have food again. That I can argue for that behavior if that's the situation in your home. If it's not the situation in your home, then it's okay to leave food on the plate, even if you're giving them what seems like really small portions. You're training your child to eat and to eat appropriately. In feeding theory, it's called being a competent eater. So that's what you have a child in training to grow up to be one of those adults, and I don't think they're real common, but I know they're out there, those people who say, I'm hungry, they know what they're hungry for, they sit down, they eat an appropriate amount, they say, I'm full, and they feel satisfied. And it doesn't look like an outrageous experience. So think in terms of that. That's what your kid's going to be like when they grow up if you follow this kind of advice. This is all out there on the CDC website, and also Ellen Satter has written a lot of books about feeding theory, and she has a fabulous website. So this is the tip of the iceberg, and those websites are listed in your packet. So I would encourage you to do some research on this if any of this sounds like something you need to get your head wrapped around. So my son refuses to eat his dinner. He picks through his food, and then I turn around and he's rummaging around in the pantry getting into the cereal box, right? But I'm afraid he'll starve. I'm afraid that, the pediatrician will call me a bad mom or a bad dad, and I'll end up having to go and see somebody because of this. So again, with feeding theory, if you're training your child, if you are providing them with meals and snacks at regular times, and they can plan on when they're going to eat, but they know that they can't graze between those eating times, you are likely to correct this behavior. Also, who doesn't love cereal? Who would not rather eat cereal than regular food, right? Salad, cereal, I'm going for the cereal, right? So that's the other piece, is that if you allow your child to graze, then they don't get focused at meal times or at snack time. My daughter refuses to eat dinner with us, and she takes a plate and she goes to her room. And and then there's another family member sitting on the sofa, and I'm in the kitchen saying, "Gee, aren't I glad I made dinner?" So again, family meal time. It's a time to be together. It's a time to eat, but it's also a time to be together and see what's going on with everybody's day. And it's a time for you as adults to model good, healthy, appropriate eating behavior. And maybe your daughter wants to avoid you, but she can talk about that. And she can do it in another way or handle getting some time by herself, but it doesn't happen at mealtime. Again, setting that expectation. And scenario number 5. I'm not sure why this one got put in here as an interviewer. So the short order cook, right? Everybody wants something different. And if you're the chief cook and bottle washer in your family, in your mind, it's easier to just make something different for everybody rather than making one entree and having everybody be cranky about it. And again, you're modeling a couple of things there. You're modeling that your time, your effort as a parent isn't very valuable, right? That you can just dote on everybody, and that they can be catered to, but also you're modeling that it's appropriate for them to pick things that maybe they don't have to eat in community. So when they go away to college, how likely do you think it is that the dorm is going to make what they want? How likely is it that if they're living with a bunch of roommates, that the roommates are going to say, sure, we will eat macaroni and cheese 6 nights a week because that's what you like? I mean, how likely is that? Not very. So what you're trying to do is to train them also to be somebody who has that flexibility in their palate, in their menu, and also that it's a community thing when you sit down and eat a meal together. And sometimes somebody gets their favorite thing at dinner time. Sometimes somebody else gets their favorite thing at meal times. And again, you're preparing meals where there's a comfortable item or two that's available to everybody. So that even though they don't like everything that's being served, there's something there that they can get a meal out of. So here are the websites. And I would really encourage you to go and check them out. I can't stress enough that as parents, this is your thing. You are in charge. It is up to you. And again, it would be hard to screw things up if you are saying, we're going to eat, and we're going to eat in a structured way so we know kind of when meal times are, and we're going to eat in a way that's pleasant, and we're going to eat in a way that our family chooses to. In other words, your kind of cuisine or the different kinds of foods that you want to try as a family. It's hard to make mistakes when you step into your power as parents and just say, we're in charge here. And it will really benefit your children as far as something as simple as eating behavior. I think we've gotten so much information out there about what's good and what's bad. I think it's really helpful to just get back to the basics and say, let's just sit down and eat as a family. And I think I'm going to hand this back over to Mary Jane.
We put this slide up here because this is a great indicator as far as portion control. I fess up, I am a person who has been on multiple diets in my life, and I've succeeded and I failed, and it comes and goes. But one of the biggest things that I see in my own life and also in the kids that we see in our clinic, it's portion control. Very few people in this country actually know what true portion control is. I've learned a lot of tips along the way from various and different programs that I've been in myself, but I like this slide for kids because it is very visual and it gives you an idea that the kids can see that, yes, I should be eating mostly vegetables and mostly fruits, and the grains are, your cereals, you can put your starches in there, or your beans or your legumes or anything like that. And then protein, which are basically your meats and your fish and some dairy products. And then also, your cup of milk. So I like this because it's very visual for kids, and it's an easy way for parents to kind of figure out, okay, I've got the food groups covered, and these are pretty good proportions and everything. All right, these are just little tips, survival tips for parents as far as how to get kids to eat different things. Breakfast, they're not kidding when they say breakfast is the most important meal of the day, because you've actually gone 10 to 12 hours without any calorie intake. So your internal engine is running pretty low on fuel. So you really need to everybody needs to have breakfast in the morning. But the breakfasts that we serve in this country are not always the most nutritionally good breakfast, because there are a lot of pastries, donuts, sugar cereals, that kind of thing. But what you really want in a breakfast is you want protein, and some fruit is a great idea, for a breakfast. Protein could be in the form of peanut butter. I eat peanut butter toast about 6 out of 7 days of the week. If you have time in the morning to make scrambled eggs, that's great. If you want to microwave a couple of slices of bacon for the older kids, bacon does have fat in it, but as long as they don't eat the whole package, a couple of slices is fine. It's not that high in calories. In fact, it kind of amazes me that it's not that high in calories. But consequently, also, you have to think, if you have a child that has a high cholesterol, bacon and eggs is not a great choice every day of the week. You can have it occasionally, but not every day of the week. But protein helps us stay full longer, because it's harder to digest than the sugary cereals. Sugar is digested very easily, so you get this kind of spike in your blood sugar that goes up about an hour after you eat, and then about 2 or 3 hours after you eat a sugar-coated cereal, your insulin kicks in and your blood sugar takes a nosedive. And when your blood sugar takes a nosedive, it tells your brain, wake up, I'm hungry and I want to eat again. But if you have protein, that helps maintain those blood sugars so that you don't have big spikes. And that helps you be satisfied longer, so that you can space out your meals a little farther apart. Water, water, water. That's all I got to say, is you need to drink a lot of water. You got to keep your system hydrated. Also, water helps fill you up. I have a big plastic cup that I keep on my desk, and I drink about 2 or 2.5 of those every day. But it keeps me filled up, so I'm not munching and looking for snacks all day long. Reduced sweetened beverages, juice is good in moderate amounts, but you don't want to have your toddler running around with a tippy cup full of juice all day long, because there's a whole lot of high fructose corn syrup or sugar or whatever sweetener in a lot of these juices. Some of them are 100% juice, but a lot of them have a lot of sweeteners in them. So really, juice should be a treat. It shouldn't be a staple in your child's diet. Milk is very important for kids because it provides calcium. It also provides protein. In infants and young toddlers, so any child that's from birth to 2 years old, when they get transitioned over to milk, they need whole milk, because they need the fat for brain growth during that part of their life. You have a lot of brain growth in the first 2 years of life. After about 2 years of age, you still need the milk, but you don't need the fat so much. So cut it back to 2%. 1% would be great, and skim would be ideal. Although it may take a little while to transition your toddler from whole milk to a reduced fat milk, but you can do that, gradually. So you're still getting the benefits of the protein and the calcium in the milk, but you're not dealing with all the fat issues. Toddlers will be less intimidated about meals if they have silverware and dishes that are their size. You can buy a lot of really cute plastic dishes that have, Spider-Man or whatever on them, and some of them are even divided into correct portion size. But that way, your child thinks that they're eating lots and lots of food, and you know that they're eating a proper portion. and it's not quite so intimidating to see this big dinner plate coming at you with globs of food, and you know, as a toddler, you're thinking that, you know, to please mommy and daddy, I need to eat all of that. And when really, you know, the portion is kind of out of size for their appetite and for their age. So for the little kids, smaller silverware and plates are much better. There's the old fill the plate with half fruits and vegetables. Like Peg said, you just have to keep exposing your child to fruits and vegetables. You know, we had a rule in my house when my kids were little. It's like, okay, you can tell me that you don't like something, but you cannot tell me that until you actually take a bite of it. So don't just look at it and go, ew. Don't fall for that with your younger child or your school-age child. Just say, you know what, you need to take a bite of it and tell me then whether you do or don't like it. So don't let them just turn up their nose automatically without tasting everything. And just keep adding on fruits and vegetables. And you know, some kids are going to love those little mini carrots. Some kids are going to love apples. If they like just one particular kind of fruit, that's great for a while, but just keep encouraging them to try other types of fruits. And as Peg said, don't be a short order cook. It's more important to do family meal time, and the kids will learn this is what's being served tonight. Okay, I like the mac and cheese. I don't like the green beans, but I'll eat some bread, or I'll try a little of this or a little of that, or I'll have some applesauce, something like that. So, you know, don't do a buffet style. It's not gonna, in the long run, it's only gonna make more work for you, and it's really not gonna help your kids improve their nutrition any. And don't make them clean their plates. I was raised in a farm family. We always had to clean our plates. And so I can tell you firsthand that please don't do that, you know, because it teaches the kids how to learn to be self-limiting. They learn to listen to their body's cues, and they will say, you know what, I'm full. I don't want to eat another bite. And that is what we want them to learn. We want them to listen to their bodies, tell them when they're full, because when they're teenagers and they're off at college and you're not there, you know, cooking every single meal for them, they will be able to hopefully avoid putting on the freshman 15. Most of this we've already gone over before. There's a couple of things. A meal should last approximately about 20 minutes or so. And the other thing is it takes about 20 minutes for your stomach to tell your brain that it's full. So if you have a child who has actually eaten, you know, if they've cleaned their plate because they were hungry, that's great. And then they say, I want more, tell them to drink a glass of water first, and then wait about 15 minutes. And then if they're still still hungry, they can have a second portion. But you determine what the portion size is. You know, don't let them go to the pot or the stove and just get up a big old ladle of whatever you've got going there, whether it's chili or spaghetti or whatever. You determine what the portion size is for your child. But usually within that 10 to 15 minutes, 20-minute time frame that they're waiting before they have a second portion, their brain is going to kick in and their stomach's going to go, you know what, we're really not that hungry anymore. I think we're done. And that way you can teach them how to kind of self-limit themselves. As Peg said, most importantly, model, model, model. You have to be kids watch you whether you think they're watching you or not. I have had conversations with my two sons who are teenagers. I'm living the dream. And they repeat things to me that I didn't really think they were listening to the first time around. So kids watch their parents for cues. They take cues from you. And so if you're exhibiting a healthy attitude with food, they will pick up on that. Oh, goody, now we get to go into fitness. This is the second part of the equation. It's great to learn how to manage your food intake, but it's also great to learn how to manage your exercise and fitness, because that is so completely important to maintaining good health throughout your life. And if you can get those habits started when the kids are young, you're going to have much less problems as they get older and get more independent. We find in our clinic that when the kids are in the 5-year, 6, 7, 8-year-old range, a lot of times it is much easier to change their habits and get them rearranged as far as healthy lifestyles than it is the teenagers, because teenagers think that they know everything at that particular point. So it's hard to change their patterns when they get older. With younger kids, we don't have a set time as how much activity, but obviously they should be active about every day of the week. Going out, running outside, playing tag. Our youngest group of kids in the Heroes program is the 5 to 9-year-olds. I can tell you right now, I never knew there were so many variations on the game of tag, but it is a running game. It's cardiovascular, and that's what burns the calories. You get your heart rate pumping, you break a sweat, that's where your calories are burning off. So we play a lot of tag. We play a lot of red light, green light. We play a lot of duck, duck, goose. So for the younger kids, it's game playing. And whether they're outside playing in the snow, that's great exercise. Even if they're just sledding in up and down the thing, they're dragging a sled up a hill. That is exercise. So don't underestimate the power of just being outside and running around. And you don't have to have a lot of fancy equipment. I mean, playing with balls or jump ropes and that kind of stuff is great also, but you don't have to have that for the kids to get exercise. Now, the children and the adolescents, the school-age kids and the teenagers, there are some definite guidelines. Ideally, they'd like 60 minutes a day of active physical activity. That's the ideal world. That doesn't always happen in the ideal world. What we tell our kids in the Heroes program is that we would like them to be active a minimum of 30 minutes 6 days of the week. But we also encourage these kids to set their own goals as to what their fitness activities are going to be. Some of our kids are really amazed when we tell them that fitness activities, raking leaves in the yard counts as a fitness activity for our kids. Scooping snow in the wintertime counts. Helping with housework, and the hard housework, the vacuuming, taking laundry baskets up and down the stairs, or just doing a bunch of, trips up and down the stairs. That's all exercise. And some of our kids are really amazed because they think that it has to be a formal program where I go to class and somebody tells me to do this exercise and somebody tells me to do that exercise, or we play this game or we play that game. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So you can modify a lot of stuff to get the kids moving. One hint I'll give you, if you have boys in your home, because that's all I have at my house. I don't know what to do with girls, but I do know what to do with boys. When my boys were in the toddler stage, so we're talking probably 3 and 4 years old, I could watch them. The energy would just kind of like start to build up like a volcano. And I knew that if I didn't get them moving, something was going to get broken or dented or scratched in my house. So I would make my children go outside and run laps around my house. And we live in our yard is very steep. It has some steep side hills. So they had to, they were puffing around there, getting up and down the hills. But with boys, and sometimes all they did was run 3 or 4 laps around the house, but it was just enough to burn off that excess energy. So that's just my own experience. It's my tip for dealing with boys. The kids that we do in our program, obviously a lot of them are couch potatoes and they don't like moving. So we give them hints as far as what they can do at home, because a lot of them can't afford to go to a gym, or they don't have the means to get there, to get transported to the Y or something like that. If your child is a couch potato and watches a lot of TV, when a commercial comes on, tell them to get up, and during the whole commercial, they have to run in place, they have to do jumping jacks, they have to go run up and down the stairs until all the commercials are over. In an average half-hour show, I think we figured it out, there's about 12 minutes of commercial time. So you can get a fair amount of exercise going, and even in short, frequent bursts like that, you will still get benefit from it. So it doesn't have to be that you go out and spend an hour, running around outside or playing ball or anything like that. It can be high intensity activity in short bursts, and it will still help, because anything that gets our heart pumping and gets the sweat going is good exercise for burning calories. I do want to say one thing about organized sports, though. Sports are very important if you have a child that really, really loves a particular sport. I just want to warn you, think about when they're at practice. I have a lot of kids, a lot of boys that play football, and they say, oh, I've got football practice, 4 days of the week, which is great because they're out there, working out. But if you stop and look on the sidelines, if you're watching, the coaches stop the play a lot because they have to explain plays and they have to do strategies and all that kind of stuff. So you have a whole team full of kids going, okay, coach, but they're standing around. They're not moving consistently all the time during practice. So just beware that even if they are in organized sports, they're still going to need, on their off days, they're still going to need to be moving and working, because they're not burning as many calories in some of those sports as you think they are. Oops. This just kind of gives you an idea of the different types of activities that you can do with your kids. This is also a good time to get some alone time with your kids. A lot of times children really want to have some one-on-one time with their parents, because we're all busy, we're all going 6 different directions, or we're taking this brother to hockey, and we're taking this sister to dance class, and somebody's got to go to gymnastics, and you're meeting each other on the street in the cars. So if you can carve out some time and maybe just take a walk with your child, or go if you have animals, if you have a dog, take the dog, have your child go with you, that kind of stuff. Or go, run to a park on a Saturday afternoon or something like that. Because a lot of this, the way it helps instill these habits in the kids is if they see that their parents think that this is an important activity, that my mom thinks that this is important because she's going to take me out and we're going to go play in the park for a while. So in their mind, it gets imprinted that, being outside and exercising and having a good time is a good thing. Now, moderate and vigorous activity. Okay, here's how we kind of describe it. If it's low intensity, it means that I'm doing something active, but I haven't really broken a sweat, and I can talk in a conversation to anybody that happens by to talk to me. Moderate intensity means that I'm sweating now, and it's a little harder for me to talk, but I can still carry on a conversation. Vigorous intensity is when I am sweating like a pig and I can't talk because I'm breathing so hard. So that's just kind of we'll give you a simple guideline as to how much activity your child's getting, or you're getting, for example. And this is just kind of basically one size does not fit all. So we have to tailor things to kids. All right, I'm going to give you a real shortened version of the HEROES program. We're now going from preventative, which is what we've all been talking about right now, into treatment, medical treatment for obesity. Children's has taken the step of developing this team to take care of these kids. We have to have a physician referral to get into our clinic. We cannot have families self-refer. And we do have some BMI criteria that the kids have to meet. So that's all up there. We have two components to our program. One is the medical clinic, because we do have a pediatrician and a nurse practitioner that follow all of our kids medically. And then we have the education and fitness portion of our program. So we offer weekly education classes that deal with nutrition and behavior modification, and then we also offer fitness classes for our kids. This is the team. We have Dr. Christina Fernandez is our pediatrician, and Rachel Anthony, she is our nurse practitioner, and then Peg is our psychologist. and she's also our manager. There's 2 nurses, myself and Crystal Hartman, and then Denise Bryson is our dietitian. We have 2 exercise specialists, Monica Klon and Jessie Thomas, and we have 1 social worker that helps because a lot of our kids have financial barriers as far as participating in our program. Plus, our social worker is also a licensed therapist, so she does like some of the initial screening for any of our kids that may have some behavioral issues that we have to deal with also. When you come to our clinic for the first time, our evaluation appointment lasts about 3 hours. So we take a lot of time with our families. Our program, if you enroll in the program, it's a 6-month program because we realize that we're not going to change these patterns overnight. We also require that our families, the whole family, parent and child, be involved in the program. And we also allow siblings of our kids to work out with their brothers and sisters if they want to. We also allow our parents to do fitness class if they want to. And on Mondays and Thursday nights, if you were out in front of here, you would see what I fondly refer to as the thundering herd, because this is where we run laps and we get going, and it's fun. We're a loud, noisy, goofy bunch. And I can't wait for next Monday because we're going to have our little Halloween party, and we're telling the kids they can come in costume as long as they can work out in their costumes. So it ought to be interesting. Our philosophy, we kind of talked about it. We're family-centered. We're pediatric. We don't deal with adults. I mean, we see kids up to 18 or 19 years of age, but after that, they can transition to adult programs. The main difference is when you're dealing with pediatric obesity issues and versus adult obesity, we do not put our kids on diets. In our program, diet is a 4-letter word, and we don't use it. We cannot calorie restrict our kids because most of our kids are still growing, so we don't want to have a bunch of short, skinny kids running around. So we calculate calorie intake that will provide optimal growth, but will get their weight under control. And sometimes with our kids, it's a matter of just making them stop gaining weight so that they can actually they can grow into their weight. So even if our kids only stop gaining weight, that's a victory for us. But we do a lot of medical management, so we're doing a lot of lab testing. We're looking at a lot of lab values to see where we have to, how we have to treat our kids. This is a growth chart of one of our kids, and at point A, that was where the BMI was at the initial, and you can see it's way over where it needs to be. And at B, that was at the completion of 6 months of the program, so you can see where the BMI dropped way back into a normal pattern. And then we did kind of some maintenance phase at C, and you see with the, as this child got older, the BMI followed the appropriate curve. So this child maintained a normal weight for them, which we're so excited about. And these are just some recommended resources that we talked about. We still have time left, so if anybody has any questions, we're more than happy. Yeah?
Our child drinks a lot of milk. He's 23 months today. A lot of milk.
Whole milk?
Well, we switch him between skim and vitamin D. He doesn't seem to notice the difference.
I would try and transition him more to 1% or skim milk and just forget the whole milk, because he's old enough. He isn't gonna. I mean, he doesn't need the fat for the brain growth. He's pretty much at the end of that period. So yeah, I would just get rid of the whole milk.
But we will turn off the TV during mealtime because we were it was convenient And but what if he's drinking his milk and watching TV? Does that
after a meal or
after a meal?
Yeah, that should be okay. I mean, you still want the bulk of the meal to be at the table, so he gets those habits developed and everything. But if it's like a snack or something like that,
his yogurt or something, he just loves dairy.
A lot of kids, I was a big milk drinker, so a lot of kids, and that's fine, because that's much healthier for you than if the kids that are total juice drinkers. Those are kids that are really hard to get them into dairy products because they're so used to all that sweetness from the juice. So it's hard to transition those kids, but milk drinkers are great. Make sure he's getting enough water though too. Okay. Yeah, and and sometimes you kind of have to say, you know what, I want you to drink this cup of water, and then you can have your milk. And the cup doesn't need, you could put it in like a regular juice glass, maybe just a 4-ounce glass, and say, you drink the water, and then I'll get you your milk. Do it that way. Yes, ma'am.
What about with school? Like, even if you've talked to the school and teachers about making them finish their lunch, or at least trying their lunch, but then they end up eating nothing at school, and they come home and they try to raid the entire kitchen, and they won't wait for dinner.
You might want to think about packing their lunch. Okay.
And then at school, she'll just throw away whatever the hot lunch is.
Does she say why she doesn't like to eat at school?
She just doesn't like it. But she'll eat whatever we give her at home.
Okay. Well, most kids, school-age kids, still require a snack after school anyway. So it's not bad for her to have a snack, but you need to be the one that limits the portions. So if you say, say when she gets home from school, you say, you know what, you can have this apple, and you can have this string cheese, or you can have this yogurt and another piece of fruit or something like that, and that's what you get until supper's ready. And basically, you just kind of have to put your foot down. Yeah, that's the hard part.
Tries a lot, but yeah.
How old is she?
6.
Okay. I can tell you from experience from having teenagers, it's easier to fight the battles when they're 6 than it is when they're 16. So right now, and the thing is, it's consistency. It's basically every day, because she is going to test her boundaries and she is going to push you to the limit, but it's once she realizes that, you know what, Mom says I can have my snack, this is my snack, and then supper, and when she knows that supper's coming, she should be, eventually it will stick. But it's going to be a little bit of a battle. And the other thing you can maybe do is do a sticker chart with her, so that like if you pack her lunch, and let her make a suggestion as to what she would like in her lunch, and then when she comes home from school, if she has eaten whatever she said she would eat, give her a sticker, and then just do a reward system. And after she gets like 5 days of stickers, give her a reward. Just make sure you don't use food as a reward. So if it's she likes some little wants a Haribo or something like that. I'm running out of rewards for girls because I don't know. But do something like that. A sticker chart also works, because then she would start to eat at lunch, which will help so that she doesn't so she's not a starving Marvin when she gets home from school.
Always tell which days that she didn't eat anything.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a matter of, there are kids that just absolutely have to have control over their whole life. So if she feels like she can have a say in what goes in her sack lunch, then she might be more apt to eat it. So, some little hints. Anybody else?
How about bedtime snacks?
Bedtime snacks are okay. I would not make it anything heavy or sugary. And I probably wouldn't, what time is bedtime? 9? I probably wouldn't give anything after 8 o'clock at night. So, because you just don't want a lot of heavy food sitting in their stomach at night, because your stomach's going to start digesting that, and there's a couple things. Because you're sleeping, you're not burning off those calories, so those calories are going to turn to fat. And also, kids that have excess weight around their middle tend to have a lot of heartburn, and when you're laying flat in bed, that stomach acid just sloshes back and forth, and so you can have problems with heartburn later on. So I would just say, kind of maybe a piece of fruit, or some, maybe a couple of crackers with a little bit of peanut butter or something like that, but nothing after 8 o'clock at night. And the other thing is, make sure that your child drinks some water with the snack too. Give them a glass of water to go with the snack too. So, yeah.
I know you said, don't force your child to finish their meal,
Mhm.
but we have a daughter that consistently doesn't want to finish her dinner, but then an hour later or half hour later, I'm hungry, I'm starving. So what do you suggest? Do you make them eat what they didn't eat for dinner, or do you just say
No.
no more food?
I just say no more food, because that way she's going to listen to her body the next time around. And if she knows that she can't graze, I can assure you she's not going to starve to death. There are very few children that literally would miss so many meals that they would drop so much weight that they would get into trouble. This is real common in the toddler phase. Toddlers go through kind of cycles. Like there was a time when I thought all my kid was going to eat was chicken nuggets, and I thought that was the whole extent to his repertoire. So yeah, we would let him have some chicken nuggets, but we just kept offering different foods. But the thing is, if you have somebody like your daughter who says, no, I'm not hungry now, or I'm too busy, I want to go play, this isn't my time to eat supper, it's basically the consistency. This is supper time, this is when you eat, and when you're done with supper, you're done. And you're going to have to say no. And it's hard, it's not fun, because I don't know how it is at you guys' house, but I thought that when my kids were 2 years old that I was geared up for the terrible twos, and my kids were great during their whole second year. Well, on their third birthday, aliens came, took my angel children, and left these demon children in their place. And I was not sure that my sons or myself were going to live to see school, because they kept pushing boundaries between the ages of 3 and 4. I think for me that was one of the hardest developmental stages as a parent. But it's basically, you just got to tell them the same thing over and over and over again, because until you think, have I raised brain dead children or are they deaf? But once they know what their boundaries are and what is expected of them, they settle down. But it's that, I tell you, 3 and 4, if anybody's going through that stage right now, I'm with you. I'm glad it's not me this time around. But anyway, so yeah.
So if we if we insist that they should have a particular time only, then wouldn't their internal clock be not followed?
For sleep or for meals?
For eating meals.
Well, everybody has an internal clock, but you can reset the internal clock it helps to stay on a regular pattern if you at all can, because his internal clock will reset itself and it will get it to a more normal pattern. What you don't want to see, and what I see in a lot of the teenage kids that we see in our clinic, is they don't eat a lot during the day, but they get up in the middle of the night and they go sneak food, and parents find lots of food wrappers in their bedrooms at night, and you really do not want to get into that pattern, because that is so difficult to break. So you basically just have to teach them that this is breakfast time, this is lunch time, this is your snack time, and this is your supper time. And you may have to give them, for the younger kids, sometimes it turns out to be almost 5 or 6 small meals a day rather than 3 big ones and a couple of snacks. Just because their tummies can't handle that big volume. So, it wouldn't be unusual to give a child a nice breakfast, and then maybe an early lunch around 11 o'clock or something, and then a mid to late afternoon snack, and then supper, and then maybe another little snack before they go to bed. So, anybody else? Yeah.
My older daughter gained a lot of weight starting kindergarten.
Okay.
And, looking back at it, you didn't even recognize her. Like, we didn't even realize how much weight she had gained in that time. So now we're looking back at what what she was eating in the last year and what she eats now. And I struggle with, I'd like to give her breakfast in the morning before she goes to school, but they also serve breakfast because she goes to kids club.
Oh.
So, and I know what they serve for breakfast is not necessarily, like, I mean, I know she picks like the biscuits and gravy and the breakfast pizza over like the yogurt and granola bars and things like that.
Does she have to eat breakfast at Kids Club, or?
They sit them all down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
At
they
the
take
same
them all
time.
down no matter what, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so you don't get a choice.
So I can control what she eats for lunch for the most part, but I really have no control
Over breakfast?
It's better to feed her a little bit before she goes and hope that she doesn't eat as much later, or just.
It might be a good idea just to have her drink some milk or get some kind of protein in her stomach before she goes, and then maybe she'll be a little more full, so she won't get into all. I mean, maybe she'll only eat half a portion if she's a little full. So either a cup of yogurt or some milk, a glass of milk, a little string cheese thing. It doesn't always have to be a breakfast food, but something with protein in it, and that will hopefully help curb some of that that she gets at Breakfast Club. And I know schools, it's a big challenge to try and keep your child on a healthy path with schools, because I used to volunteer at my kids' school. I know what school lunches look like, and they're loaded with carbs. There are some programs out in the city of Omaha that they're trying to get into the school systems to make some changes, but that is a slow process. I guess my best tip would be either you may want to think about packing lunches, or if it's the breakfast issue in the morning, just give your child a mini breakfast before they go, and then hopefully they won't dive headfirst into the biscuits and gravy.
We kind of track her weight,
Mm-hmm.
and I know part of me feels guilty that I'm doing this to a 6-year-old, but at the same time, she had such a big weight gain in a year
Mm-hmm.
that we're trying to see if it's going to continue or.
Dave, do you have any hints on that one?
Does she know that you're tracking her weight?
Yeah.
Okay. That you have to.
She thinks she's trying to grow. So,
We-
she doesn't know we're trying to
We
make her
say
lose
we
parts.
say we just want to make sure you're growing right.
Okay. I think that should be something that she's blind to. In my other life, I work at an eating disorders program.
And that's what I'm worried about.
Right, so you don't want to set her up for that. And so I think it's good if she's blind to that. And I think if you just put it in a healthy way, as far as, just making sure that you're growing the weight, growing up to have the body that you're meant to have is kind of how we couch that. Ellen Satter's website has really great stuff on schools and kind of some strategies to work within the school system, but also she talks a lot about how to just talk to your kids about listening to their hunger, trying to be an intuitive eater, and also, again, growing up to have the body that you were meant to have. I think as parents, we get really scared when we have a kid who's looking a little more robust than their peers or a little skinnier than their peers. And I think we have to really trust that if we're doing a good job of feeding them and making sure that they're playing and that they're active, and more than anything, that they're happy, that they're content, that their body is probably what it's meant to be. But I don't think it's good when we get really focused on that number on the scale. I just don't think it's not a helpful message to anybody.
I just felt kind of bad when she went in for her yearly checkup and the doctor's like, oh, well, she's gained 20 pounds in a year. And, we don't even realize that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So,
Well, but they usually,
20 pounds in a year for me would be a lot.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit for a 5-year-old.
a lot of her stuff is get her doing some more active play. And you probably think she does a lot of active play, but you might be surprised that it's less than you think. The other thing is, kids, when they're about ready to go through growth spurts, they will put on a little extra weight. They'll get a little rounder around the middle, and then their height starts to catch up with them. 20 pounds is still a little bit more than what you would normally see for a growth spurt, but it's not unusual. So don't get really, really nervous if you notice your kids are getting a little, rounder around the middle for a while, because they may be, and their appetite increases. With boys, if you don't have 2 of everything, sometimes you're gonna hear about it. But I always noticed with my kids that when they started eating for 3 people, the next thing I knew, in the next 6 months, I was buying pants that were a lot longer too. So and that's natural. That's your body's system. It puts on the weight to sustain the growth before you do the growth. So like Peg said, in our clinic, the only time we ever weigh our kids is during a clinic visit. We don't do it weekly. We don't really even talk about it that much because we don't want them to focus in on it. So I think, just making a few maybe lifestyle changes with maybe a few changes in meals and meal planning, that kind of stuff, and up and exercise a little bit, I think you'd probably see a big difference. What we teach in the Heroes Clinic is not rocket science, it's more common sense, but I think unfortunately in this country there's so much about body image and obesity that we've got every parent going, oh my God, I don't want my kid to be, some big chubby kid, when it's like a lot of it is just your normal body habit. I mean, I'm never going to be a size 3. I'm a big German girl, so we don't come in size 3s. So, it's just a matter of getting used to what God gave you. And so that's kind of, we want you to have the information to make some changes if you need to, but we don't want you to go home and stay up late at night fussing about this, okay? You're doing good. It's a good deal. So thanks for coming. Has anybody got any other questions for me? Because of course I talked too long again. But thank you for coming. We really appreciated it.